afternoon once again. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the last session of our 1 week online virtual free tutorial. And I'm sure at least there are certain things that you've gathered when it comes to answering IELTS questions, especially all the 4 aspects. So what we will do today is very simple and interactive, because we will, as much as possible, would want to have some level of association with you, and for you to also be able to tell us or tell me some of the problems that you face in your individual learning of and preparation to the test, and also for me to be able to assist you in a way. And then if you have a comment or a suggestion that you want to add, you can also put it across. But basically we want today to be very, very interactive. Now that is the purpose for today's session. Unfortunately, today is the last day, as I said, and I would want you to be able to express all challenges, all comments, and anything that you're facing or you're having difficulty on. So as I always say, if you join in, please mute your mic so that it will be easy for us to have this discussion and we wouldn't have any form of interference in the background. So today we are going to discuss or base our discussion and my presentation on the speaking test. Yesterday, unfortunately, I think there were some hitches here and there in our transmission. I think it was some form of network that was actually preventing a smooth discussion and delivery. But today, I'm sure everything will go smooth as possible. So if you have any question, please don't hesitate to put it across. So because of my delivery, you can raise your hand or you can draw my attention, then you can join in, ask your question, and then we will all find a solution to your question. And then I welcome you all to this session. Then today we are going to talk about the speaking test. Then initially in the beginning of this section, we have been discussing some various and important tips and tidbits in answering all the other 3 aspects. Actually, in the beginning of the session on Monday, we touched a little on the speaking test, but then it was an overview of the test format. But today I want us to delve a little deep into the actual test itself, especially with the speaking. But then after discussing the speaking, we will also talk a little bit on the listening. But then I would also want us to talk about the listening first, because we started discussing it, but unfortunately we couldn't complete it yesterday. So I would prefer that we spend some time on the listening test, then after that we jump straight into the speaking. Then, as I said, if you have any questions, any comments, anything that you want to share, or any experience, you can put it across, at least for today's session to be very interactive. All right, so in the first part that I want to talk about in the listening test is the test format. Actually, you are actually going to listen to 4 different recordings. The first recording is the first recording is a conversation, a dialogue between 2 different people. Well, it can work, it could be different, it could be the same. 2 people, either a man or a woman, or a man and a man, a woman and a woman. So definitely there's going to be a conversation between 2 people. The second recording is just one person. Mostly the person will be giving some form of commentary or a speech on something, on a topic, and then based on that you will use it to answer the questions that will follow. Now the third recording that you will listen is also a conversation, but in this case it's a conversation between three people. It can be four actually, not just three. It is three or more, so let's put it that way. So the first one is between two people, second one is just between one person, one individual providing commentary or a report on a particular topic. Now the third one is a conversation or a dialogue between two or more people. It means that there's going to be like a group of people who are going to discuss something, and then based on that discussion you listen and use that to answer the questions. Now the last one is also a monologue. Now the monologue, as I said, just like the recording 2 or the second recording, it is just one person. Now the fourth recording is just one person who is going to talk on, especially most of the times it is the topic that they talk about is relatively or related to academics. It's sometimes about a lecturer and a student, maybe a college administrator and then the student, or maybe a lecturer and a college administrator and then a researcher, something related to academic. So they will be talking about how, for instance, how they'll be doing the research, or how they'll be going through certain things. So definitely it is going to be somebody telling or giving information on academic topics. So this is the various formats. The first one is between two people, second is just one person, third is two, three or more, can be 4, 5, 3 or more people. But that is the part where you have to take note of the various voices, because each voice is going to provide a different idea that will answer a particular question, or the voice is going to link an answer in the question to somebody's to the other person's speech. So you have to take note of the various voices that will be discussing in the third recording. So the fourth recording, as I said, is also just one person, but the person will be talking about or be providing or will be discussing or talking about academic topics. As I said, it could be research, it could be something about university, it could be anything, but then the basic discussion will be on academics. Now these are the 4 various recordings that the speaking test will require you to answer questions on. And then in each of these, the first thing that you should know, the first most important thing that you should know is for you to be able to pay attention or focus on the recording, because the recording that you are listening, or the recording being played to you, is the solution to the question that you are answering. Every solution in the question can be located in the recording that you'll be listening. That is why you should be very attentive. You should be focused in listening. No matter the gadget or device that you are using, if you are using a speaker or if you are using a headphone, you should be very attentive and you focus on what is being played to you. Now, don't forget that the recording is always played once. It is always played once. So the only chance you will get is for you to have a few minutes to transfer your answer or your answers. So all the time, pay attention to the recording. Pay attention to the various voices, especially in the recording 3 where it is between 2 people, or it's between 3 or more people. So if it's between 3 men, You should be able to identify each of the voices in the recording. Then you should be able to know what each of them is going to talk about. That is what will link you to the answers to the question. Now, sometimes the answers will be so clear, especially with section 1. The answers will be so clear. So you hear a name of something, you hear an address, you hear a telephone number, you hear specifics. You always hear specifics. But when it comes to the recording 3, where it is between 3 or more people, you have to relate the answers from the recording that you are listening to. Because if you are not able to get those recordings and you are not able to digest the meaning to the recordings that they are making, it becomes very difficult for you to answer. And if you don't take care, you might be skipping a lot of the questions without answering them. And I always advise that never in your life ever skip an answer or leave a question blank in the IELTS listening or reading test. Because whatever that you are, anytime you are short of answers, if you are not able to complete the whole answer questions, it means you have not been able to fulfill the whole task of that particular test. It means that your task achievement was not fulfilled. It means you will be marked down. That is where you might lose a band score. But then, as much as possible, try to be able to fulfill everything, answer everything. Then you will still be in the range of the band score. So, as I said, first one, you listen to every recording once. It will not be played twice. So you have to be very attentive. You also have to attempt the questions whilst you are listening. So it means that about 3 of your senses are going to work when you are taking the listening test. Your first sense is your hearing. Second sense is your, let's say, touch, because you're going to write, and then your ability to also analyze and get the answer. So you have to follow the questions and the recording as and when the answer, the recording flows, and then you also have to link it to the question that you are answering. But one thing that you should know is that anytime, for instance, it is possible, it is actually not strange for you to skip or for you to lose focus on 2 or 3 answers. But then if you do that, if you lose focus and you were not able to answer about two or three questions, or even one question, and you were not able to answer them, then you have to find some relationship that the previous questions and then the answers that you got, the relationship that they have with the latter ones. Then you can link them together and find a word or words to fill the portion where you have left. It doesn't actually mean that what you write mostly is the right answer or the wrong answer. But then you, as much as possible, try to find something that relates to the recording that you are listening in, to write down in the space that you have left. Now, you always have to write your answer in short term. Now, one thing is that you don't have to answer it in the answer sheet, but you have to write your answers in shorthand in your question paper, because you will be given some time to transfer your answers onto the answer sheet. So as much as possible, try to use your pencil to answer your questions in shorthand. So those of us who don't know how to write in shorthand, it means that just use some shortcuts. Then you have to be careful the kind of shortcuts that you use, and you have to write clearly, because you might come back and not know what a particular word stands for. So you should write in shorthand, but then write clearly for you to be able to identify or write in full the answer that you have written. So after that, the little time that will be given to you, you transfer everything onto the answer sheet. Now the answers are generally one or two words or one sentence or a phrase. So you don't have to write the whole sentence whilst you are listening to the recording, because it might waste your time and it might also create a space for you to skip answering or answers that some questions. Sorry. The next thing is that you have to also write a word as you hear it. You write the word as you hear it, since definitely the recording is going to be in a different accent from our local Ghanaian accent. It's going to be different. So as and when you hear the word, you and how you heard it, you have to write that. Don't try to think for the recording, or don't try to conclude for the recording that you are listening, because you are expected to listen, and what you listen you put down. So you don't have to, as much as possible, try to conclude or think that maybe this is what they mean, or this is the kind of word that they want to say. No, but you write the word as and when you listen. Now, if there are options, for instance, there might be MCQs, there might be what we call objectives. You have to just write only the letter that is correct. You don't need to write the whole word. For instance, if the options are, say, pen, pencil, eraser, and then ruler. Say A is a pen, B is a pencil, C is an eraser, and then D is a ruler. In all these four options that you are expected to select the correct answer, don't write the answer in full, but just indicate by the option, which is the letter that relates to the right answer. So if B is the right answer, you only have to write B. If C is the right answer, you only have to write C. And as much as possible, give attention to key information that the recording will provide, especially terms or maybe terminologies, and then maybe times, dates, name of persons, name of items, name of an object, etc., etc. You pay attention to all these key items or key things, because those are the ones that will give you a direction as to how you will get your answer. But then if you are only attentive on the sentences alone, you might miss out in a particular day. For instance, if the recording is talking about today's date or a particular period of time, and then you pay attention to only the description of the period, but you don't pay attention to the dates that are in the description, you might miss out, because a question might be put to you that you should state the date. So always pay attention, just as you pay attention to dates, acronyms, abbreviations, numbers, figures, and etc. in the reading test. You also have to pay attention to all these in the listening, because sometimes answers are based on these major things. You base they base their description, their ideas in their conversation on the dates, time, names, etc. for you to get the answer. So one other thing that you should also pay attention to is that the recording includes some form of narration which have say various and variety of accents. Sometimes in the third recording, it can be a British, an American, an Australian, or maybe a different person from a different English-speaking country. You know, every pronunciation from these places, from these people, from these countries are different. They vary in their pronunciation. So that is why you have to put down or state the kind of word that you hear and how you heard it. So it doesn't matter how they pronounce it, they will still mean the same. And then the basic understanding of the word will also not change. So you have to be very careful and then very attentive in listening. Now, the listening test requires multitasking skills, as I said. A lot of your skills are going to be put to use. It is not just your listening, but a lot of your skills or your senses are going to be put to use. So you always have to, attention is very important. Concentration is also paramount. So you always have to make sure that anything that you do, you will never lose concentration, because in any case, you will still have to focus on what you are listening to and how you are answering the questions. Yes. Please, I hope the audio is clear enough. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, one other thing that I also want to concentrate on is that definitely IELTS is an English test. It is an English test. Therefore, it is an English test. Therefore, if we start, we have to make sure that whatever that we are listening, whatever that we are answering, we read the question to understand. Now, most people say, oh, you have to connect the keywords to the keywords in the recording. That is true. You have to connect them, but if you think those keywording will not work for you, you have to pay attention to the basic idea. For instance, a typical recording 1 or section 1 will be talking about, say, a discussion between two people on maybe a lost item. So if there is a lost item, then the person will be talking about that item which has been misplaced. So in one of the Cambridge practice tests, you realize that they were discussing, or somebody was reporting a missing briefcase. So in this case, you have to pay attention to certain things that are obvious on that object. So certain things that are obvious on that object. So you have to make sure all these are actually identified. Some of you are sending me that you can't hear me. Please, is it clearer now? Is it clearer now? Can you all hear me? Okay. Okay, Hajia, can you hear me? All right. All right. So basically, these are the most important tips that you need to know before you actually answer as a writing test. Somebody said, I like using the word actually. Yes, I really like using it, but it doesn't mean you should also be using it in your writing. Otherwise, you'll be repeating a particular word, which is not healthy. You have to make sure you blend your vocabularies, and then even in your speaking test, which we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. So you don't have to use one word continuously, but you have to use several words, synonyms that are very important. So now I will quickly run you through the tips and the guidelines for answering the listening test. And in the first place, as I said, you should be able to identify the that you are going to listen to 4 categories of recordings. The first one is going to be a recording between 2 people or 2 individuals. The second one is going to be a recording between just one person. And in this case, that person will be providing some form of a discussion. Yes, Moses, your hand was up. Please, you can unmute your microphone if you want to ask a question or if you want to pass a comment. Okay. So you are going to listen to 4 categories of recordings. The first one is a conversation between 2 people. Second one is a recording where somebody will be providing a speech or an overview of a topic. And the third one is a conversation between 2, 3 or 4 individuals. And the last one is also a monologue where you talk about one person will be talking about an academic topic. Now, as I said, you have to attempt the questions whilst you listen to the recordings. The questions are in different forms, and then they flow orderly as the audio is also being played. Now you write your answers as short as possible in shorthand, so that when you are transferring it into your answer sheet, it will not be difficult or you will not lose in answering any of the questions. As much as possible, again, don't forget that you must answer every question. You must answer every question, and you should never leave any question blank. Now you also have to check how you spell your words. You also have to check some of the spellings, because spellings can change the meaning or the pronunciation or the meaning of a sentence or the word itself. And you give attention to key information. Those key informations are the ones that I mentioned, that some terminologies such as the name of something, the date, and then some abbreviations and then acronyms. You also have to pay attention to it. Now, you also have to make sure that you have 100% concentration on what you are listening to. That is very important. And the listening requires 3 or 4 different, that is basically multitasking. So you have to make all your senses very attentive to listen. That is very, very important. Okay. Now, today I want us to go on to the speaking test. I wouldn't want to spend much time, because the next session that we'll have will be interactive, where you have time to ask your questions. Now, the speaking test is in 3 different parts. Now, part 1 is such that the examiner is going to inquire certain information about yourself, your family, hobbies, your interests, studies, etc. All these ones that they will ask you will last between 4 to 5 minutes. So basically, part 1 is all about yourself, things that are related to you. Now, part 2 is where you'll be given a task to fulfill, where they'll give you a question, you will read your question, you will have 1 minute to prepare yourself or your information which you're going to express to the examiner in 1 minute. Then after that, you'll be given 2 minutes to also explain and answer the question. Now, don't forget that in all cases, try as much as possible to complete the task, because task completion is one of the categories that they use in marking. Now, the third part, most of the time, is related to part 2. After you provide or you fulfill the task in part 2, most of the questions that are in part 3 are linked or related to the delivery that you gave or the answer that you provided in part 2. Now, these are some of the things that I want you to note when you attempt or when you are taking your speaking test. Obviously, because it is in an interview form, you have to try as much as possible to dress properly whenever you go there, because you have to appear presentable. That's very important. Now, the format is in such a way that the test takers will be seated in a different room, and then the examiner will also be in a different room. So when it is your turn, for instance, if it is Moses' turn, Moses Heniza, you'll be called to enter the examiner's room where they will start with the speaking test. Now, first and foremost, when you enter the examiner's room, at least because it is a formal exam that you are going to take, you have to restrict your greeting or your initial interaction to formal greetings. So you can say hello, hi, good morning, good afternoon, and all of that. It should be formal. But hey, what's up, that kind of thing, actually you should kind of limit it to the formal greeting, because it is a formal exam that you are going to take. Now, as much as possible, in order for you to feel less tensed, the best thing that you would do is for you to keep a smiley face. You see, sometimes when you smile, it gives you some level of confidence and it relaxes you. So you have to be able to keep a smiley face. Then, as much as possible, you should speak clearly. Pronounce the words as you know them to be pronounced. Now, you don't have to go there and express to the examiner that I'm a Ghanaian, but I also have a British accent. I'm a Ghanaian and I also have an American accent. No, you have to speak clearly. You can still speak in whatever accent that you feel you want to, but you make sure your delivery should be as clear as possible. Whatever that you're going to speak on, you have to speak up and speak clearly. Now, one thing is that they are not actually looking for real facts, truth, or lies. That's not what they are looking for. No, because what you will say, whether they are true or not, it will not affect your scores. But how you express it is what affects your score. That is why confidence is very important. So you should be very confident in your delivery. You should be very clear in your delivery. You should be very factual. Now, being factual doesn't mean that you have to speak the truth. Being factual doesn't mean you have to lie. Sometimes in part 2, the examiner will just note you or will caution you that you have some few seconds to wrap up. Now, in this case, you will still have to be able to speak within the 2 minutes. You don't have to speak for 1 minute 30 seconds, and you sit and wait for the examiner to ask you another question. Because once you are given 2 minutes, make sure you speak for that period until the examiner tells you, or he or she tells you that okay, your time is up. Then the follow-up questions will come. Now, as much as possible, if you are able to exhaust all your information that you noted down in the part 2, if all the information that you noted down, if you're able to exhaust all of them, but you still have your 2 minutes is still not up, then you have to start making things up. Whatever it takes to get your 2 minutes or to speak within the 2 minutes. You can make things up, you can create your own facts, you can come up with certain things that may not necessarily be factual. You always have to come up with something, but as much as possible, speak for the 2 minutes. You don't have to speak for less than 2 minutes, and then you will not be allowed to speak for more than 2 minutes. So when the examiner prompts you that your time is up, you quietly end your time. Now, you also have to be very responsive. Being responsive is your ability to quickly provide an answer to a question, or your ability to respond to a question. Fine, you might have some levels of hesitation. When I say hesitation, I mean maybe you might be struggling to gather some information, especially when you are answering part 3 or part 1. But then when you are having some level of hesitation, whether language or whether ideas, you don't have to be too quiet in responding to a question. You always have to be very responsive. So whenever the question is asked, you can start. Now when you start to answer a question, the most important thing is you have to provide some level of time. If you think you didn't actually understand, you have to ask a question. If you are not clear of what the question means, you have to ask a question if you didn't hear what the examiner said. But as much as possible, always try to get your understanding before you start to attempt the question. Now you have to keep speaking on the topic unless the interviewer stop you or the examiner stop you. If you are talking about electronics, and then you speak for a very long time, as much information as you have, you can share it, but you have to make sure that you speak until the examiner stops you before you conclude. Now when you are done with the interview, you quietly leave the room by expressing your appreciation when the examiner or when you are discharged of the interview or the speaking test. But then anytime that you take part in this kind of test, you try as much as possible to speak fluently, as much as possible to speak clearly, as much as possible to bring in variety of vocabulary, variety of idioms in your speaking. So you have to, as much as possible, create that spicy information that that kind of interest in your speech. But then you don't have to make it too boring. For instance, you'll be asked a question and you just answer with a yes or a no, and the examiner might be looking at you, waiting for you to provide another or further details to the information that or the answer that you've given. So as much as possible, you try to answer a question that is given you with 2 or more ideas. That is very, very important. Now you also have to, as I said, you also have to be very responsive. Now being responsive, I explained earlier that you have to have a very reasonably quick attempt to answer the question. Reasonably quick. Now it will really contradict, or it will really confuse you if you are too quick to answer a question, because you might end up not answering or not fulfilling or achieving the task for which the question is given. So you have to try as much as possible to be responsive and not to be too quick to answer your questions whenever it is given. Now, although fine, there are certain words that you can use to relax yourself, even though you want to be responsive. There are certain words that you can use to relax yourself and to give your mind some few seconds to think. For example, you are asked, how many siblings do you have? So maybe quickly you cannot answer and say yes or no. But you can use words such as, well, okay, oh yes. These are words that you can use to create a space for your mind to think. So Have you ever been to the airport before? Well, yes, I have. Then you continue with it. Have you visited the dentist before? Yes, I have. Actually, then you continue with your answer. Now, then a question like, how do you think television provide information to kids of school growing age? Now, this question will need you to think. At least you have to think a little bit before you answer it. Because if you go straight to answer it, you might not even answer the question itself. You might be beating about the bush, or you might be sparing around, be moving and then dancing around the question, whilst we will not be answering the question. So, for instance, this kind of question. So, what do you think, or how do you think television is beneficial to kids of school growing age? So before you start, you can use, as I said, words like, well, I think kids need, then you continue with it. Or, okay, television is good. So in this case, you are responsive because you have attempted the question, but you were not too quick to answer. Or you can even start with, although I think television is beneficial to kids of school growing age, then you continue with that. So at least all these words that you use to start your answer will give your mind, or will give your brain some some seconds to think. Because if your mind is not able to think through the question and understand the exact question that is being asked, the answer may not answer the question, or the answer may not be the required information for that question. So definitely you will need certain words to begin. Now, one thing that you should also know, it is just a conversation. Actually, the only difference is that you will not have the chance to ask a question. Somebody is going to ask you questions for you to answer. But the only questions that you can ask is when you are not able to, or when you do not actually understand, you don't really understand the question, and then you didn't hear the question, or his or her accent didn't actually provide a clear information to the question. That is where you have the chance to ask. But the basic thing is, this particular speaking test is all about conversation. You're having a conversation between somebody that you probably might have not met before, or a strange person somewhere. So your response to the questions is that it shouldn't be too rapid, too quick, too immediate, but you have to make sure that your response is within the particular time frame, or you are responsive to the question. That is very, very important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would want us to end here, so that if anyone has a question, the person can put it across, and then we can address your question for you. Until then, you can find this video on YouTube at the Actual Links YouTube channel, so that you can watch it again if you missed it out, or you can just inform anyone who wanted to be part of this conversation but was not able to join. You can find us on Facebook and then the YouTube channel. All right, so any questions so far? Any question on what we have discussed? Okay, so if there is no question, then I would want us to end here, and then draw your attention to the fact that we are still organizing tutorials for 6 weeks on IELTS, all the 4 aspects. And then anyone who wants to join, you can contact us through any of our platforms. You can find our numbers all over our ads, all over our various social media platforms, and then you can find us there. And then don't also forget that we organize mock tests for anyone who has already registered the test and preparing on his or her own. Maybe you are studying on your own, but then you want to know whether you are ready for the test or not. We organize mock exams or mock tests for anyone who wants to be or know that he or she is ready. I would like us to end here, and we want to thank you for being part of this session from Monday up to now. So not easy anyway, but I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your patience, and then we will inform you of any of such schedules or any of such programs in the upcoming weeks. But then we will also be having a Facebook live session on Tuesday at 4 o'clock for on IELTS, PTE, and then CBT. We'll also be talking much on the CBT for our nurses who want to know much about it. So we'll talk about IELTS, PTE, and then CBT. So if you have any question, you have any conclusion or any addition, you can put it in the comment section. As I said, you can find this video on YouTube and on our Facebook platform. So till then, have a lovely weekend, and I wish you all the best in your preparations. Those of us who are going to write tomorrow, I wish you all the best, and then I pray that you get the band score that you require. God be with us all, and contact us anytime, any moment, any place. Thank you for your attention, and God bless you.